The soft hum of quantum computers filled the global communications center as the morning sun painted Seoul's skyline in shades of gold. Park Ji-ho sat at his station, sipping his third cup of coffee while monitoring the constant stream of interstellar communications. After 15 years in the service, he had grown accustomed to the routine. Mostly trade negotiations, cultural exchanges, and the occasional diplomatic spat between alien civilizations. That morning began like any other. Ji-ho's colleagues chatted about their weekend plans while running standard diagnostics on the deep space arrays. The artificial intelligence assistants processed millions of signals per second, filtering out the cosmic background noise from actual transmissions. At precisely 9:47 a.m. Earth Standard Time, everything changed. The main screen flashed red, indicating a Priority 1 transmission. The AI had already begun decoding the complex quantum-encrypted message. Ji-ho's coffee cup slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor as the translation appeared on his holographic display. This is an emergency broadcast from the Eldarian Federation to all spacefaring civilizations. We are under attack. The Kresh Empire has begun systematic elimination of our outer colonies, civilian casualties in the millions. Our defensive capabilities are overwhelmed. We request immediate assistance under Article 7 of the Galactic Charter. The message continued with tactical data, casualty reports, and footage that made Ji-ho's stomach turn. The Kresh, a species known for their militant expansion, had unleashed a campaign of unprecedented brutality against the peaceful Eldarians. Around him, the control room erupted into frantic activity. Analysts began cross-referencing the data, verification protocols kicked in, and the room's mood shifted from routine professionalism to something darker. Ji-ho watched as his fellow officers' expressions changed, first confusion, then disbelief, and finally raw anger. The response from other advanced civilizations began filtering in. The Zentari Collective. Message received and logged. The Proximan Alliance. Situation noted, maintaining observation protocols. The Vega Confederation. Monitoring developments. One by one, the 12 most technologically advanced species in known space acknowledged the distress call and did nothing. Their responses were diplomatic masterpieces of non-commitment, carefully worded to avoid any obligation to intervene. "They're just going to watch," whispered Kim Minji, a junior analyst whose hands were shaking as she processed another batch of casualty reports. How can they just watch? Ji-ho felt something he hadn't experienced since his military days, a deep burning rage that started in his gut and spread through his entire body. The Eldarians were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful explorers, scientists, and artists. Their only crime had been developing valuable resources that the Kresh Empire coveted. More footage arrived. Civilian ships being shot down as they attempted to evacuate. Entire cities reduced to ash by orbital bombardment. Children separated from parents in refugee camps. Each new image stoked the fury building in the control room. Ji-ho opened a direct channel to the United Earth Council. His fingers flew over the holographic keyboard as he compiled the data packet. Then he paused, cursor blinking on the screen. Protocol dictated a neutral summary of the situation, but humanity had long since learned that neutrality in the face of atrocity was nothing but cowardice disguised as wisdom. He added a personal note to the transmission. "We cannot stand idle." The message went out, racing through quantum channels to every member of the council. As Ji-ho waited for their response, he noticed something remarkable happening in the control room. His colleagues weren't just angry, they were organizing. Without any official orders, analysts began compiling strategic assessments. Military liaison officers started reviewing Earth's defensive capabilities. Logistics specialists pulled up transportation and supply chain data. The humans in that room, representatives of a species that many advanced civilizations considered primitive and emotionally unstable, were preparing for war. Not because they had been attacked, not because their interests were threatened, but because somewhere, someone needed help, and no one else would provide it. "Sir," called out Lee Jun-seo from the tactical station. "I've identified vulnerable points in the Kresh defense grid, requesting permission to forward the analysis to Fleet Command." Jeho nodded, pride mixing with his anger. This was humanity at its finest. Not the passive observers that the advanced species had become, but people willing to stand up, to fight, to risk everything for what was right. The quantum communications array chimed with new incoming signals. The other civilizations were still sending their carefully worded non-responses, still choosing to watch from a safe distance as atrocities unfolded. But in that room in Seoul, and in similar facilities around the Earth, humanity was choosing a different path. They were choosing to answer the call that everyone else ignored. They were choosing to be angry, to channel that anger into action, to prove that advanced technology and sophisticated diplomacy meant nothing without the courage to use them in defense of others. As the sun climbed higher over Seoul, humanity prepared to show the galaxy that sometimes the most civilized response to injustice was rage. And the Kresh Empire was about to learn why humans' emotional nature wasn't a weakness. It was the source of their greatest strength. The United Earth Council chamber buzzed with tension as representatives from every nation filled the historic hall in Geneva. The massive circular room, with its high glass dome letting in the autumn sunlight, had seen many crucial debates in its time. But none quite like this. Kim Ta-sung adjusted his formal dress uniform as he prepared to address the assembly. The weight of the moment pressed down on his shoulders like a physical thing. Behind him, holographic displays showed real-time footage from the Alderian worlds, cities in flames, refugees huddled in makeshift camps, orbital defense stations reduced to drifting wreckage. The Kresh Empire believes they can act without consequence, he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. They're wrong. The simple words hung in the air, heavy with promise and threat. The European Union spokesperson, Dr. Helena Weber, was the first to respond. "We must consider the diplomatic ramifications carefully," she urged, her hands clasped tightly before her. Earth has only recently joined the galactic community. Direct military intervention could damage centuries of peaceful relations. Chinese Representative Wang Lai stood next, his expression grave. "China proposes economic sanctions against the Kresh Empire. We can freeze their trading rights, deny them access to Earth's markets. There are ways to show our disapproval without risking open warfare." The debate spread through the chamber like wildfire. The Russian Federation advocated for a show of military force without direct engagement. The African Union called for a united humanitarian response. Brazil suggested forming a coalition with other sympathetic alien species first. Hours turned into days. For 3 full days, Earth's leaders argued, debated, and struggled with the weight of their decision. The Kresh Empire was technologically superior in many ways. Their fleet was larger, their weapons more advanced. The practical voices in the chamber pointed out the risks, the potential casualties, the possibility of defeat. But on the 3rd day, Lee Hae-Newell took the podium. She represented a coalition of nations that had experienced colonization, oppression, and the bitter taste of watching the world stand idle while their people suffered. Her small frame seemed to grow larger as she faced the assembly. "I speak for those who remember," she began, her voice quiet but intense. "My grandmother told me stories of her village burning while the world debated whether to help. The representatives from Vietnam remember their ancestors fighting against overwhelming odds. The delegates from Rwanda remember when the world turned away. Those from Palestine, from Tibet, from countless other places, we all remember what it means to watch the powerful prey on the weak." The chamber fell silent. Hae-Newell's words struck deep chords in many hearts. And now we see it again. The Alderians cry out for help, and the advanced civilizations of the galaxy choose to watch. They hide behind diplomatic protocols and non-intervention policies. They write carefully worded statements of concern while millions die. She pointed to the holographic displays, where a fresh wave of destruction played out in real time. "Look at these images. Really look at them. When our descendants read about this moment in history books, what will they say about us? Will they read that Earth, too, chose to watch, that we wrung our hands and debated while innocents died? The chamber stirred uncomfortably. Haynul's voice grew stronger. We are not the most advanced species in the galaxy. Our ships are fewer, our weapons simpler. But we have something the others have forgotten. We remember what it means to fight against impossible odds. We remember what it means to stand up when others counsel submission. We remember what it means to be angry in the face of injustice. She paused, looking around the chamber, meeting eyes with representatives from countries that had once stood alone against overwhelming force. We will not be silent observers. We will not hide behind diplomatic niceties while genocide unfolds. We will act, because that is who we are. That is what makes us human. The chamber erupted in applause. Even those who had advocated for caution found themselves moved by her words. The vote that followed was not unanimous. Such votes rarely are, but it was decisive. Earth would intervene. Earth would fight. As the representatives filed out of the chamber, many stopped to look at the holographic displays one last time. The images of destruction continued to play, but now they seemed different. Now they were not just records of atrocity. They were a call to action that humanity had chosen to answer. In the coming days, the galaxy would learn something important about their newest spacefaring civilization. They would learn that humans had not forgotten their history of standing up to bullies, of fighting for the oppressed, of channeling their anger into action. The Kresh Empire had awakened something they didn't understand. Humanity's capacity to feel righteous fury on behalf of strangers, and their willingness to act on that fury. The vote was just the beginning. Now the real work would begin, preparing Earth's forces for what might be the fight of their lives. But as Kim Ta-sung left the chamber, he felt a fierce pride in his species. They had chosen the harder path, the dangerous path, but the right path. The galaxy was about to learn why making humans angry was a terrible mistake. The line outside the Busan Interstellar Recruitment Center stretched for blocks, winding through the busy streets like a living thing. Captain Yum Sangma stood at her office window, watching the crowd grow larger by the hour. The morning air was crisp, and the sun had barely risen over the port city, but already thousands had gathered. She had expected perhaps a few hundred volunteers when the call went out. Instead, her small recruitment center was facing what looked like half of Busan. The crowd was diverse, young and old, all walks of life. Some carried small bags, ready to sign up and ship out immediately. Others clutched photos of ancestors who had fought in past conflicts. "Ma'am," her assistant called from the doorway, "we're going to need more processing stations." The initial estimate of volunteers was, well, it was way off. Sang Min nodded, still watching the crowd. A group of elderly veterans had set up a coffee station, handing out hot drinks to those waiting in line. Nearby, young tech workers who had left their corporate jobs stood chatting with former military personnel who had come out of retirement. The first interview of the day was with Kang Do-hyun, a quiet man in his 30s who worked as a history teacher. He sat across from Sang-mi's desk, his posture straight, eyes clear and determined. "Why do you want to volunteer?" she asked, following the standard interview protocol. Do-hyun reached into his jacket and pulled out an old photograph. It showed a young woman in guerrilla fighter's gear, standing in mountain terrain. "This is my grandmother," he said softly. "She fought against overwhelming odds during darker times. She taught me that evil triumphs when good people do nothing. I won't do nothing." Sang-mi noted how his hands, though steady, gripped the photo tightly. "You understand this isn't your fight. The Aldarians are light years away. Their conflict doesn't directly affect Earth. With respect, Captain, that's exactly what they told my grandmother when she asked for help." Do-hyun's voice remained quiet but grew intense. "Someone needs to stand up. Someone needs to fight back. Why not us? Why not me?" Throughout the day, similar stories emerged. A woman whose grandfather had been a freedom fighter in the Philippines. A man whose family had escaped persecution generations ago. Young people who had grown up hearing stories of resistance and survival. They all came with the same fire in their eyes, the same determination to help. By midday, the recruitment center's computer systems were struggling to process the flood of applications. Sang Mei had to call in additional staff from other districts. The crowd outside showed no signs of thinning. "We're seeing similar turnout across all recruitment centers globally," her superior informed her via holographic call. Seoul, Tokyo, Manila, Jakarta, all reporting massive volunteer numbers. It's not just military veterans either. We're getting doctors, engineers, pilots, technicians. A commotion outside drew Sang Mei's attention. An elderly woman had arrived, supporting herself with a cane. The crowd parted respectfully to let her through. When she reached the front of the line, Sang Mei went down to meet her personally. "I'm too old to fight," the woman said before Sang Mei could speak. "But I was a combat medic once. I can train others. These young ones will need to know how to save lives, as well as take them." The woman's offer sparked something. Soon, other veterans in the crowd began stepping forward, offering to train the younger volunteers. A makeshift teaching session broke out in the parking lot. Former soldiers demonstrating basic combat stances, retired pilots explaining spacecraft mechanics. As the sun began to set, Sang Mei reviewed the day's numbers. They had processed over 3,000 volunteers from Busan alone. Each application told a similar story: people who understood oppression, who knew the cost of silence, who refused to stand by while others suffered. A young volunteer stopped at her desk before leaving. "Captain," she said, "my friends think we're crazy. They say we can't win against the Kresh Empire, that we shouldn't even try." Sang Mei looked up from her papers. "And what do you think?" "I think that's not the point. The point is that someone needs to try. Someone needs to show the galaxy that you can't just destroy peaceful worlds and expect everyone to watch quietly. Even if we fail, we'll fail trying to do what's right." As darkness fell over Busan, the line outside still stretched into the distance. Sang Mei ordered lights set up so they could continue processing volunteers through the night. The Kresh Empire had made a serious miscalculation. They had assumed that Earth, like the other advanced civilizations, would choose observation over action. Instead, they had awakened something powerful: humanity's memory of resistance, of standing up against overwhelming odds, of fighting not because victory was certain, but because the fight itself was necessary. As Sang Mei watched another group of volunteers enter the center, she realized that this was more than just military recruitment. This was humanity showing its true nature to the galaxy. They would not watch. They would not stay silent. They would act, because that's what humans do when faced with injustice. The Kresh Empire was about to learn this lesson the hard way. The darkness of space lit up with brilliant flashes as the human fleet emerged from hyperspace. 47 ships, ranging from swift corvettes to heavy cruisers, materialized at the edge of Alderian space. On the bridge of the flagship, Defiant, Admiral Choi Min-ho stood watching the tactical display with steady eyes. "Multiple Kresh warships detected," reported his sensor officer. "They're adjusting course to intercept." Reading 15 capital ships, each one larger than our heaviest cruiser. Min-ho nodded, studying the angular silhouettes of the Kresh vessels. They were impressive machines, sleek, dangerous, and built for war. Their black hulls seemed to absorb the starlight, making them look like moving shadows against the star-filled backdrop. "They're hailing us," the communications officer announced. "Standard diplomatic frequencies." "Put them through," Min-ho ordered, straightening his uniform. A Kresh commander appeared on the main screen, his scaled face showing what passed for amusement in his species. "Earth vessels, you have entered a military engagement zone. We acknowledge your right to observe under Article 7 of the Galactic Charter. Please maintain your current position and refrain from interference." Min-ho allowed himself a small smile. "Transmit to all ships," he commanded. "They expect us to watch. Let's show them how humanity responds to bullies." The bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, bringing weapons online and moving into predetermined positions. The fleet split into 3 attack groups, executing maneuvers that had been practiced countless times during the journey from Earth. On the tactical display, Minho could see the Kresh ships adjusting their formation slightly, still not comprehending what was about to happen. They had grown used to other civilizations sending observer missions, ships that would document their atrocities but never interfere. A new signal came through, this time from the Eldarian defense platform. Their coordinator, Liz, appeared on the screen. The aliens' luminescent features showed clear signs of stress and exhaustion. "Earth Fleet, we're reading weapons activation across your ships," Liz said, their melodic voice tinged with confusion. You actually came to fight." "We came to help," Minho replied simply, then turned to his tactical officer. "Launch fighters, all ships, execute Battle Plan Delta." The space around the fleet came alive as fighter squadrons poured from the carrier ships. Each pilot had been chosen from thousands of volunteers. Each ship crew had trained until their responses were automatic. They moved like dancers in a deadly ballet, taking up positions that would have seemed chaotic to observers, but followed a carefully planned strategy. The Kresh commander returned to the screen, his previous amusement replaced by something closer to anger. "This is most irregular. Your species has no stake in this conflict. Stand down immediately or face the consequences." Minho's response was to switch off the communication. "All ships, battle stations, remember your training. Remember why we're here. Remember those who can't fight for themselves." The human fleet surged forward, surprising the Kresh with their speed and coordination. The larger alien ships began to turn, trying to bring their main weapons to bear, but the human vessels were already executing their attack plan. Fighter squadrons swept in beneath the Kresh shields, exploiting weaknesses that Earth's analysts had identified from studying previous battles. Corvettes darted between the massive alien ships, their smaller size making them difficult targets while they launched precision strikes at vulnerable points. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "the Kresh are signaling their other battle groups for reinforcement." As expected, Minho nodded. "Signal Group 2 to begin their operation." On the far side of the system, a second human fleet dropped out of hyperspace, catching the Kresh reinforcements in a carefully planned crossfire. The aliens had expected a simple observer mission. Instead, they were facing a coordinated military operation planned by people who had studied their tactics for months. The Eldarian coordinator watched in amazement as the human ships engaged the Kresh fleet. "Your ships are smaller," they observed. "Your technology less advanced. Why would you risk this?" Minho kept his eyes on the battle display as he answered. "Because it's right. Because someone has to. Because humanity remembers what it means to stand alone against a stronger enemy." The battle was just beginning, and the Kresh still had superior numbers and technology. But as Minho watched his fleet execute their carefully planned assault, he knew they had already achieved their first victory. They had shown the galaxy that humanity would not stand idly by while innocents suffered. "All ships," he transmitted, "remember what we came here for. Remember who we're fighting for. Show them what happens when humans get angry about injustice." The space around them lit up with weapons fire as the first real battle between humanity and the Kresh Empire began in earnest. Win or lose, the galaxy would remember this day. The day when someone finally stood up to the bullies of space, and that someone was Earth. Quan Jia's fingers danced across the holographic controls as she fine-tuned the combat algorithms one more time. Around her, the battle bridge of the Defiant hummed with intense activity. The air felt electric with tension as humanity faced its first major space battle against the Kresh Empire. "That's impossible," the Eldarian tech liaison whispered, watching Jia's code flow across the screens. "Your ships cannot perform those maneuvers. The gravitational stresses alone would." "Watch us," Jia replied, activating her newest combat sequence. On the main display, human fighters executed turns that seemed to defy physics, using the gravitational fields of nearby planets in ways the Kresh computers had never encountered. The Kresh fleet's massive ships tried to track the smaller human vessels, but GA's algorithms kept them guessing. Every time their targeting computers predicted a human ship's movement, that ship would do something completely unexpected. "Vector 7 is clear," she called out. "Fighters, execute pattern Sigma." A squadron of Earth fighters dove between two Kresh cruisers, their movements so erratic that the alien targeting systems couldn't lock on. The fighters launched their payloads, not at the ship's heavily armored hulls, but at specific weak points GA had identified through countless hours of analyzing Kresh ship designs. The explosions weren't large, but they were precisely placed. One Kresh cruiser's shield generators flickered and died. The other's weapon systems went dark. "Your pilots," the Eldarian liaison said, "they're accepting casualty risks far beyond acceptable parameters." JA's eyes never left her displays. "We're not fighting by their rules. We're not fighting by anyone's rules. We're fighting to win." Across the battlefield, the Kresh commanders were growing frustrated. Their usual tactics, overwhelming force, intimidating displays of power, threats of total destruction, weren't working. Instead of cowering or retreating, the human ships pressed their attacks more aggressively. "New Kresh transmission coming in," announced the communications officer. "They're threatening to destroy an evacuated Eldarian colony if we don't withdraw." Jaya watched as the bridge crew's expressions hardened. The Kresh didn't understand. Threats like that only made humans fight harder. She activated her ship-wide communication link. "All ships implementing combat algorithm Theta. Remember what they did to the Eldarian civilians. Remember why we're here. Show them what angry humans can do." The battle shifted into an even higher gear. Human ships began executing maneuvers that the Kresh combat computers classified as suicidal and irrational. But GA had studied human history, had learned from every desperate battle where the underdog had prevailed against superior forces. "Your ships are taking damage," the Eldarian observed, worry clear in their voice. "Damage can be repaired," Jaya responded, launching another attack sequence. "Lost lives can't be brought back. That's why we fight like this." The Kresh commanders tried their final intimidation tactic. They targeted the Defiant with their largest warship, expecting the humans to back down when faced with such overwhelming force. Instead, Jaya smiled. She had been waiting for this. "Execute Protocol Phoenix," she ordered. The human fleet moved as one, implementing a battle plan so complex and counterintuitive that the Kresh computers couldn't predict it. Ships darted in and out of weapon ranges, using each other's shield bubbles for cover, creating patterns that looked like chaos, but were actually precisely choreographed. "Humans fight harder when we're angry," Jaya explained to her astonished Eldarian counterpart as they watched the battle unfold. "And right now, we're very angry. We're angry about the civilians they killed. We're angry about the worlds they destroyed. We're angry because they thought no one would stand up to them." The Kresh flagship, faced with attacks from seemingly impossible angles, began to show signs of damage. Its commanders had never encountered an enemy that grew more effective when threatened, more determined when facing overwhelming odds. "Your combat patterns," the Eldarian said, studying Jaya's algorithms with growing understanding. "They're based on emotional responses, not logical calculations." "Exactly," Jaya nodded, launching another attack sequence. The Kresh expect everyone to act logically, to calculate odds and choose the safest option. But humans, we calculate the odds, see they're against us, and decide to fight anyway. Because sometimes, fighting is more important than winning. But they were winning. Slowly, steadily, the human fleet's unconventional tactics were taking their toll. Kresh ships, designed to fight traditional battles against predictable enemies, couldn't adapt fast enough to counter GA's constantly evolving algorithms. "All ships," she transmitted, "final attack pattern. Show them why you never make humans angry." The battle reached its crescendo as the human fleet executed their most daring maneuver yet. The Kresh commanders, faced with an enemy that refused to behave according to any known combat doctrine, finally began to understand what they had awakened. They had expected another species to watch passively as they committed their atrocities. Instead, they had roused the protective fury of humanity. And now they were learning why that was a terrible mistake. As the battle continued to rage, GA kept writing new algorithms, kept finding new ways to surprise the enemy. Because that's what humans do when they're angry. They get creative, they get determined, and they never, ever give up. Commander Ba Su-jin stood at the center of the combined fleet's command deck, watching as ships from 7 different species moved into formation alongside the human vessels. The sight was unprecedented. Species that had remained neutral for centuries were now joining the fight against the Kresh Empire. The sleek crystalline ships of the Maresh glided into position, their advanced shield technology creating a protective bubble around the smaller human vessels. The Tellarites' precision weapon platforms, looking like delicate silver webs in space, took up strategic positions throughout the fleet. All allied ships, this is Commander Ba Su-jin transmitted. Form up according to Battle Plan Echo. Human ships will take point positions. Follow our lead and trust your training. The response came in multiple languages, all translated instantly by the ship's computers. Each species had their own reasons for finally joining the fight. The Maresh had watched their trade routes fall to Kresh control. The Tellarites had seen too many peaceful worlds burn, but it was humanity's unexpected resistance that had given them the courage to act. Human commander, called the Maresh Captain Lyra, her crystalline form shimmering on the communication screen. Your species fights with unusual intensity. You engage the Kresh as if they had attacked Earth itself. Su-jin kept her eyes on the tactical display while responding. All worlds are our worlds when innocents are suffering. That's something humanity learned the hard way. The combined fleet moved deeper into contested space. The Kresh Empire had never faced anything like this before. A coalition of species working together, each contributing their unique strengths, all coordinated by human tactical officers who refused to follow conventional warfare doctrine. Kresh Battle Group detected, announced the sensor officer. 3 heavy cruisers, multiple support ships. They're moving to engage. Su-jin smiled grimly. Show them what a united galaxy looks like. All ships, execute attack pattern Delta 7. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Maresh shields flickered to life around vulnerable ships. Tellarite weapon platforms struck with surgical precision. Human vessels darted through the chaos, their unpredictable movements confusing Kresh targeting systems. Commander called out a Tellarite captain. Your pilots are taking unnecessary risks. Our combat computers suggest a more conservative approach. Those unnecessary risks are why we're winning, Su-jin replied, watching as another Kresh ship fell to the combined assault. Sometimes you have to be willing to risk everything to protect what matters. The battle continued to rage, but something had fundamentally changed in the galaxy's power dynamic. The Kresh Empire had relied on fear and intimidation, counting on other species to remain passive observers. Instead, they faced a coalition bound together by humanity's fierce determination to protect the innocent. Multiple Kresh ships breaking formation, reported the tactical officer. They're retreating to their fallback positions. Su-jin leaned forward, her voice carrying across all communication channels. They expect us to let them retreat, regroup, and choose their next target. Not this time. All ships, pursue and engage. Show them there are no more safe havens for bullies in this galaxy. The combined fleet moved as one, each species contributing their strengths to the assault. The Maresh captain's voice came through again, filled with something like wonder. Your species, you've changed everything. We watched for so long, told ourselves it wasn't our fight. But you showed us another way. That's what humans do, Su-jin responded, coordinating another attack run. We remember our own history. We remember what it means to stand alone against overwhelming odds, and we remember what it means when others finally stand with you. The battle stretched on, but its outcome was no longer in doubt. The Kresh Empire, faced with united resistance for the first time, began to crumble. Their tactics, designed to inspire fear and submission, proved ineffective against species who had found their courage. As the combined fleet pressed their advantage, Su Jin reflected on how much had changed. Humanity, the newcomers to galactic society, had sparked something powerful, not through advanced technology or superior numbers, but through their simple refusal to stand idle while others suffered. All ships, she transmitted, press the attack. Show them what happens when the galaxy finally stands together. Show them what happens when people stop being afraid and start getting angry. The stars blazed with weapons fire as the combined fleet drove deeper into Kresh territory. The galaxy was changing, and humanity had been the catalyst. They had shown that sometimes the most powerful force wasn't advanced technology or massive fleets, but the simple determination to do what was right, no matter the cost. The turning point wasn't just in this battle. It was in the heart of galactic civilization itself. The age of passive observation was over. The era of standing together had begun. The lights of New Earth Station cast a soft glow over the gathered representatives from across the galaxy. The massive space station, humanity's pride and newest achievement, hosted the historic signing of the peace accords. But the mood wasn't triumphant. It was thoughtful, almost solemn. Representative Ryu Junyoung adjusted his formal robes as he prepared to address the Galactic Council. The chamber held members from over 30 species, including the defeated Kresh Empire's delegation. The Eldarian representatives sat in a place of honor, their luminescent features still showing signs of their recent hardships. "We didn't fight because we wanted to prove anything," Junyoung stated, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "We fought because it was right." The simple words seemed to resonate with something deeper than politics or power. The Kresh representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their scaled features difficult to read. Their empire, once thought invincible, had been humbled not by superior technology or overwhelming force, but by humanity's refusal to stand idle in the face of injustice. The Eldarian High Speaker rose, their melodic voice filled with emotion. "The Eldarian Federation formally recognizes Earth as our strongest and most trusted ally. When others chose to watch, humanity chose to act. We will never forget this." The Kresh delegation's leader, speaking for the first time, addressed the assembly. "In accordance with the terms of surrender, the Kresh Empire formally acknowledges Earth's protective status over developing worlds. We bind ourselves by law and honor never to target planets under human protection." Back in the Global Communications Center in Seoul, Park Ji-ho sat at his familiar station, monitoring the incoming transmissions. The victory celebrations across Earth were notably different from traditional triumph festivities. There was joy, yes, but also a deep understanding of the responsibility humanity had taken on. A signal caught his attention, a distress call from an unknown species at the edge of explored space. Ji-ho read the message, his heart heavy but his resolve firm. Without hesitation, he began the notification process, knowing that humanity would answer this call just as they had answered the Eldarians. "Are you certain?" his assistant asked, noting the time stamp on the notification. "The fleet has barely returned home. The crews need rest." Ji-ho nodded. "Send it through. This is who we are now. This is what we do." On New Earth Station, the formal ceremonies continued. Representatives from various species approached Junyoung, many expressing the same sentiment. Humanity had changed the galaxy's political landscape forever. "You must understand," a Maresh diplomat said, their crystalline form catching the station's lights. "We had grown comfortable with observation. It was easier to watch than to act. You showed us another way." Junyoung's response was characteristic of humanity's new role. "We remember our own history. We remember times when the world watched as injustice prevailed. We swore never to be passive observers again." The Kresh surrender document was unprecedented in galactic history. Never before had a species been specifically named as protectors of developing worlds. But humanity's actions had earned them this unique status, not through conquest or intimidation, but through their willingness to stand up for others. As the day drew to a close, Jaho continued his watch in Seoul. The notification of the new distress call had already been sent to the United Earth Council. He knew what would happen next. Volunteers would step forward, ships would be prepared, and humanity would once again stand up for those who couldn't defend themselves. The galaxy was learning something powerful about its newest spacefaring species. Humans didn't just fight to protect their own interests. They fought because they couldn't bear to watch suffering and do nothing. Their anger at injustice had found its purpose, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. In the years that followed, the galaxy would change. The age of passive observation was over. Other species, inspired by humanity's example, began to take active roles in defending the weak and supporting developing civilizations. The Kresh Empire, reformed and chastened, joined in peacekeeping efforts. But it was Earth that remained the first responder, the guardian, the species that would always answer a call for help. Their reputation spread across the stars. If you were in trouble, if you faced overwhelming odds, if you needed someone to stand with you against impossible odds, call Earth. Humans would come. They would fight. Not because they wanted to prove anything, but because it was right. And in his communications room, Jaho continued his watch, ready to relay the next call for help. Because that's what humans do. That's who they had chosen to be. Asterisk, the end asterisk.